Okay, so I've given you how to thread the needle with the needle threader, and these are just 3 other small little tips and things that are useful if you're going to be hand sewing. So hand sewing or machine sewing, this is called a snips, and it's a really good tool to have. I think they're like maybe under €5, but they're pretty cheap. So if you're near your local haberdashery or fabric shop, most of them have these, and they're just a nice thing to have because it's just handy rather than having to get your fingers into a scissors. So that's the first one. The second one is when you're going to be threading your needle, you don't want the way sometimes if you're sewing and your thread keeps getting knotted. So a tip for that not to happen is to use this end of the thread to thread your needle rather than when you pull it off and cut it using this end. So use the end of the thread that was closest to the end of the spool, if that makes sense. Now, so the third one is when you're cutting your thread, you might think, how much thread do I cut and how do I know? Do I cut it like, what people will do sometimes is they'll cut a really small piece, and then that's really annoying because you'll sew like a little few stitches and then you're going to have to change it. So, you have to do the knot again and all that stuff. So the best rule of thumb is to cut the piece of thread the length of your forearm. So just like up to your elbow crease, like hold the thread, put it up to your elbow crease, and then you can just take off another little bit because it's going to be folded over. So I'm going to snip it here. Oh yeah, I knew there was a last tip. The last tip I have is to cut your thread at a diagonal. So it might not seem like that's going to make a difference. Now we're going to cut it at a diagonal there, but remember I was saying not to use the just cut piece, to use this one. So we'll just snip the top of that at a diagonal so it's easier to thread. Use the needle threader if you don't want to do this piece. And then when you put your thread in, you're just going to take this piece and you're just going to pull it down a little bit. And if you're finding it hard to work with the piece that's that long, just pull this down a little bit more. If you feel like you want a short piece, just pull it down, like right down to nearly the bottom, but not the bottom. So that's those. And the next video I'm going to show you how to tie a knot at the end of your thread. But that's the 4 tips. I'm not going to recap them because I'm not going to remember them, but there was 4 tips in that. So hopefully that will help you to do those little steps.